Well, hey, Vision. I got some good news for you today. Would you like good news? Like in your life, could you use more good news? Okay, so say good news. Good news. So I know a lot of our weeks, I said we don't get good news. We get our taxes back. We're like, man, that's not good news. We get the teacher calls and said, we got to talk about your kids' grades. And like, man, this ain't good news. Or on a serious note, honestly, your doctor or something happens where they say, I don't have good news. So we can get together and talk about good news. We celebrate it. And the good news we talk about today, honestly, it trumps all the bad news. It does. It does. It goes beyond it. And like I started talking about in the welcome in regard to good news, salvation, a lamb, a king, this story, it starts in a courtroom. So tell me, has anybody ever maybe watched a show with a courtroom in it? You ever watch a show, had a courtroom, we're talking Perry Mason, A Few Good Men, Legally Blonde, something like that. And hey, Bruiser's tough, okay? That little dog is tough. But, okay, how about, has anybody ever been in a courtroom? You ever been in a courtroom? And one of our host team guys on the security team, he works in the courtroom. So sometimes he'll call me and be like, Pastor Matt, you won't believe who was in the courtroom this week. Vision. Now, okay, you don't have to show me with hands or anything, but I wonder, have you ever been on trial? Have you ever been where a jury and a judge is looking at you? So you're hoping for grace. You're hoping for some mercy. You're hoping that the punishment is not going to come down on you. And I think back to those Israelites, and that was called a Passover. Remember with the firstborn, that the death angel was going to pass over. That God, as a God of justice, was going to say, okay, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of salvation, of saving your firstborn. For those Israelites, that door frame, that doorway was of utmost importance that they managed it right. When I think about doorways and the history of different doorways, I think back to when I was a kid. I don't know if you ever had this dream or this nightmare, but I had this one like over and over again where I was at the side door at our house that would lead out to our driveway, and I'd step out, and a guy on a motorcycle would drive up, and he had on a helmet where I couldn't see his face, and I could tell that something was wrong. That literally, I was in immense danger. So as he pulls in, I'm doing everything I can to get back in my door. And I get over there, and I shut the door right as he gets over there, and I wake up. And honestly, I had that dream multiple times, and I still have not been to the right counseling to figure out what it means. But I guess God is saying, Matt, save that for the day that you talk about doors. Because when you think about a door and you want to get in it no matter what, think about maybe some movies you watch. Maybe it's down like in a subway, the big train or something's coming, and it's coming, and the guys are like, we got to get off the tracks. And there's like a door, and like, man, open the door. And we got to get off the tracks. And they can't open until the last second. They fling it open, and they step in the door, and they're so grateful for it. Or think about maybe if you're out in the rain, and you're driving home, you get to your driveway, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to wait this thing out until the rain slows down enough so I can get out, and it doesn't. So finally you got to say, okay, let me time this thing to open my car door and run up the steps hoping that somebody left the door unlocked, so boom, I can get inside that door and get safe from the rain. Maybe you're a kid playing hide and seek, or maybe you just have had the week or the day or the year, and you say, man, I need to get home. I just need to get in my doorway to get to a safe place. Or how about here at Vision? Maybe you said, I'm not going back to church, or I'm not ever going to church. I'm not going to go through the door of a church again. And somebody got you here. And then your second time, and your 10th time, and your 20th time, you said, man, I need to go through that doorway this morning. I need a place of encouragement. I need a place where I'm not going to be judged. People aren't going to look at me. They're going to put their arm around me. And you say, I'm going to walk through that door. Well, the Israelites, remember in that moment of that last plague, everything changed for them about how they thought about doorways. And for them, it was no longer just some pieces of wood that took them into a place. This was going to be literally their salvation. If they followed God right and did what he said to do, this doorway would save them. This comes down to faith, and it comes down to obedience, because they were talking about a lamb. Remember, you'd have to take a lamb And this is so hard because it got personal when they would raise this lamb and they bring it in to kill it, and the kids would be like, no, Dad, don't kill the lamb. He said, guys, we have to. This is a faith and obedience moment that blood must be shed with this lamb. And little did they know that it was symbolic of a lamb who would come many years later. But that lamb who would come years later, it wasn't against his will. It wasn't because he didn't choose. It was by his own decision that he would give himself, that blood would be shed, and that he would be a conquering king, that he would be one of victory. He'd be one that people would be telling of that good news for generations to come. So let's talk about this king. As we wrap up this series, you asked for it, a question we saw multiple times, and I think a question you hear from time to time is, did Jesus really have to die? Did Jesus really die? Is this just a hoax, a myth, a story, a fable, that this thing with Jesus didn't really happen and we didn't really need it to happen? And people just discard that and say, now let's not talk about that. It can't possibly be real. But did Jesus really die? Let me set the tone of what was happening in this story. This Thursday night, this last night of Jesus' life, he got together with his closest friends because he knew what would happen the next day. He got together with them and had a final meal. We call it a Last Supper. In that time he spent with them, they took communion. They broke bread, they drank juice, and he was telling them, guys, this has meaning. This is going to mean a lot more to you tomorrow when you see what happens. They had this meal. They sang a song. They went out into the garden to where Jesus knelt down and prayed with intensity. I mean, you imagine how intense you would pray if you knew that you were going to die the next day. And Jesus, as fully God and fully man, he had power. I mean, he also had this side of him that was scared. He said, God, this is going to be terrible. How am I going to do this? And he prayed with an intensity and said, Father, I need you to give me what I need so I can do this. And then they came to him. These soldiers came to him. And make sure you get this again. He didn't get taken away against his will. He chose to be taken. Because in that moment when the soldiers came up, dozens of soldiers, strong, powerful, aggressive soldiers, came to him and they said, hey, are you this guy Jesus? And he said, I am. And they all fell down. The power that came through him shocked these men to the ground. You know, soldiers, they don't bow down for anybody. They don't fall down unless something powerful has hit them, and that power came out. And Jesus kind of said, okay, you can get back up. Do what you're here to do. And then one of his guys, Peter, said, okay, I'm going to defend you, and he pulled his sword out, cut a guy's ear off. Jesus said, wait a second. This isn't how it's happening. And his power turned into humility, and he picked up the ear and put it on a guy who was coming to get him. He put it on and said, I'll heal you. And then as they took Jesus away, and the guys were saying, Jesus, wait, we'll defend you. We'll protect you. He said, wait a second. I have angels at my disposal. Not the fluttery, floaty kind. He said, I have got warriors ready at my word. Thousands of them. These angels that in the Old Testament, one angel was powerful enough to kill thousands of people. So Jesus, he said, guys, look, I have got the power to stop this, but I have got the will to let it continue. And in that moment, as everyone scattered, and Jesus went on his way. Now, with Jesus as this lamb, people would say, okay, did he really die? Did he really have to die? And there's a couple theories. It was almost humorous as I dug into this week and said, okay, what theories are there that people have about Jesus and whether he really died on that cross? There's one, it's called the wrong person theory. This is serious. The people say it wasn't really Jesus. That when he got beaten and everything and mangled up, that actually they switched him and took another guy and put him up on the cross and said, wait, look, his mom was there at the foot of the cross weeping, broken because her son was up there. His best friend was there saying, oh, how can this be happening? The Pharisees, these are the guys that were fanatical about wanting Jesus dead. They were there saying, that's the one. Don't let him go. That clearly is the one that we want to die. So in terms of this theory, this wrong person theory, I mean, there's no way. There's just no way. The second one is called a swoon theory. Swoon theory. And swoon means that you faint because of extreme emotion. You faint because something has happened to you, either great or traumatic, that the emotion hits you and you faint. People say, okay, well, what Jesus had been through when he got on the cross, that he fainted or went unconscious, and they kind of missed that. They took him down, they put him in the tomb, and once he got in the tomb, the cool air kind of resuscitated him, and he came out. Now think about this. Jesus, when you look at the Gospels and see where it says Jesus was flogged, that is expanded to mean he was beaten, whipped, scourged, pushed to the point of death by what they did to him. They wore him out. Then Jesus went up this hill and they took 5 to 7 inch spikes and put it through his hands, his wrists, his feet, put him up there to die. You get to this point now where the Roman soldier who was assigned to him, this guy, it was his job to make sure that he died. And in fact, if somebody ever got off that cross alive, the Roman soldier assigned to him would die. So these guys were serious about making sure that this person who'd been beaten and had spikes and was hanging, that they would die. So that's when the guy took the sword. If you ever heard it, they poked him in the side, jabbed him. You know, they didn't do that just kind of like wake him up. Which, okay, if you were fainted or unconscious, that would wake you up. To get a sword, push you in the side. What they did it for is to jab him so that, you know, if you jab me, blood flows out. If you jab a dead person, blood and water flows out because water has collected around the heart and water has collected around the lungs. And so when you poke that, blood and water flow out and the soldier says, indeed, this person is dead. But what if for some reason they messed that up? They took him down, they put him in the tomb. In the tomb, they took close to 100 pounds of spices and piled it all over his body and wrapped him up. So you're saying, okay, so Jesus would have, I guess, thrown 100 pounds off of him. Then there was this stone that was so big, it would take multiple men to possibly roll it out of the way. You're saying, so if he was just fainted and he came awake in the tomb, he moved this stone by himself and he overthrew all the guards who were out there. And again, these guards had the same mandate of, if anybody gets in that tomb, or I guess if somebody came out of it, which would be really strange, but if that ever happened, you guards are going to die. So just in theory, if he did all those things, then he walked 7 miles down the road up to the city of Emmaus, where they finally realized he was alive. Then he walked 7 miles back. You know, you don't walk 14 miles if you were just pushed to the point of death and you'd fainted and you woke up. And if he did all that and got back to town and looked at his guys and said, I'm here, you're a victorious king, they would look at him as a half-dead zombie and say, well, I certainly don't want any of that. I don't want to live a faith that's going to take me to a point like that, where you are stumbling along with scars and sorrow and beaten and broken down. That's not how Jesus was. When he rose from the dead and he had energy and power and joy and victory, and yes, he had the scars, but they looked at him and said, that's a guy who's defeated death. So to say the swoon theory, there's no way. There's just no way. Well, when you continue and talk about these guys and what compelled them, what inspired them to follow Jesus, clearly, it wasn't a half-dead zombie that inspired them. It was a living and victorious Savior. So say living. And victorious. Now, you want to dig into this more? Thursday night at 5, like John said, we're going to see The Case for Christ. And this movie is based on a book that a guy wrote, a guy who was so opposed to Jesus and the concept of him being the Savior that he said, I am a world-renowned journalist, and I'm going to throw myself into researching it so I can prove him wrong. All these Christian people, I'm going to prove them wrong, and he dug into it. He dug so deep into it that he looked at it and said, I can't turn away. This is real. And he gave his life to Christ. So when we go see this movie and they go out to dinner, we're going to sit there and talk about it and say, man, our faith is strengthened by people that research this. Our faith is strengthened when we talk about, did Jesus really die? Well, the second question, did Jesus really have to die? Was it necessary? Were things that bad? Were we that bad? Was there a punishment that bad? You think back to Passover, and with that dad and his kids, and they'd be saying, Dad, no, the lamb doesn't need to die. You don't need to kill a lamb. He said, guys, God said this has to happen. We can't just, use something else. Just, put dirt on it or something. Just, put something else on it. We can just act better. We can just be better people, and God will look at us and say, okay, you don't need to do that. We can just go through some rituals or say some things. No. One thing had to happen. Blood had to be shed. It's the same thing with our punishment. Our sin. That God looks at us, just like in that courtroom where justice must happen, God looks at us and says, justice must happen. You are guilty for your sin, so there must be punishment. And in that, blood must be shed. You say, man, it seems so violent. No, it's just. That in Hebrews it says, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. That if blood is not shed, God cannot forgive. And so in that, say, how do we feel about these door frames? Because, Richard, if you would, bring up our blood or our paint. And these Israelites, thank you. When they were faced with the reality of what God told them to do, they said, okay, well, we'll prepare blood. We'll kill a lamb and provide blood. And God says, you must also act with faith and with obedience to accept the blood that has been shed. So understand, with Jesus, when he came to live, and again, by his choice, he allowed himself to be killed. He said, I knew that blood needed to be shed for this little boy. I knew that for this little girl, or for the ones back there, or for our oldest people, that blood had to be shed. God said, I'm not going to make this complicated. I'm not going to make this difficult for you. It was incredibly difficult for Jesus. But for us, it's so simple. He says, if you will think of it like a door frame that needs to be painted so that you can walk through it and be protected, he says, honestly, it's as easy as ABC. He said that if you would admit that you are sinful, that you're not perfect, and I think most people would say, that's me. I'm not perfect. I'm a liar, a cheat, an adulterer. I got a temper. I've done things wrong. He'd say, okay, let's start there. Let's admit that you're sinful and paint like that. And say, okay, God, I'm with you on that. He said, but where Jesus comes into this picture is that you have to believe that only his blood can do this. Remember, it can't be your good works. It can't be your effort. It can't be something else you paint on there. It's got to be his blood because he earned it and gives it to you freely if you believe. If you believe in the truth of his death and resurrection and believe, like it says in John 14, that he's the only way. There's no other way for that protection, for that salvation. You have to say, okay, I believe that Jesus died, that he had to die, that he's the only way, and you paint it and say, okay, God, I'm there with you. He says, good, you're almost there, because the demons believe this, and they shudder. The demons believe in Jesus and what he's for and what he's about. But demons, they don't take a knee to the Son of God. God says, you must choose. You must admit and believe and choose. You must choose to live for Jesus. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. But it doesn't mean you're going to be humble. And you're going to lay yourself down and say, okay, God, I choose that. I choose to live for Jesus. I choose to paint that part of the door frame and do what you say I need to do. Now, with this door frame, back in that day with the Israelites, this meant the world to them. Because I have a firstborn. You got a firstborn. And if God said, there's only one thing you can do to save that firstborn tonight, you would do it. And I would too. So when I think about today, God says, there still needs to be justice. There still needs to be blood shed, and here's how you do it. Well, at Vision, we've given our life to this. And 3 years ago, I sat in the living room with Mike McCatherine. Mike, come up here. And I said, Mike, this is what we're building it all on, is that you paint the door frames and you walk in here, and that's what saves you. And I said, Mike, will you go there with me? And he said, yes. And Mike, he then said to a friend of his, hey, Bill Geither, here's what God's doing at Vision Church. Will you go there with us? And Bill came in here and said, I'm going to do this. And Bill Geither said, yes, I'll walk through that door frame. And I will accept that protection that God gives me. And then Bill Geither said, I got a friend, Matt Curry. He said, Matt, you got to come to this church. God's doing something here. It's not complicated. It's easy. And Matt said, I'll do it. And I'll walk in that door frame and I'll accept it because I can't earn it. So if you would, pick up the green card that was on your chair. And I'm asking everybody to, because in moments where somebody is having God speak to them, they could be sitting next to you saying, man, I can't write something on my card because everybody's going to look. Well, the way you get past that is everybody picks up their card. So if you join me in that, everybody picks up your card. And you look at that card. And you think about this door frame and these guys. And you say, man, I don't know if I've done that before. I don't know if I've admitted that I'm a sinner, believe that Jesus is the only way. I don't know if I've chosen to follow him. So when I pray in a minute and we have a song to reflect, you can mark on there that, man, today's my day. Today is my day of victory. I'm accepting him today. I'm doing this thing. I'm going to be saved today. Or if you're sitting there and saying, man, I did that last week or last year or 10 years ago, then you mark that on there. And I would love to know that about you. And again, by you doing that, that makes it easier for her or him to mark on their card, because they can't see what you're marking, but they see you're doing something. Or maybe you're saying, I just kind of need to talk to somebody about this some more. And you mark on there and say, well, somebody contact me about accepting Christ, about being baptized, which is coming out saying, I'm living for Jesus now. I want to be baptized. Or just, will someone contact me about helping me grow in my walk with God? You mark that on there. Or if you just need prayer about something, you mark that on there. But this can be your day that is so memorable that the next morning, when the Israelites, when they came out, and they felt great. And then honestly, they felt awful because their neighbor 2 doors down was in anguish because their firstborn had died. And you kind of want to say, I told you, but honestly, what you could say is, I'm telling you, it's not too late to understand this about God and about salvation.